Welcome, everybody, to Commoner Law Group's monthly free traveler confab, where we free travelers get together and discuss the importance and the need to assert our natural God-given rights to travel on our highways and byways without the interference from government. We meet every first Tuesday of the month, and we'll be here for about a couple of hours. My name is Clint Grease, and I'm grateful to be your host. I see David Rodriguez is here as well again, and we'll have a special guest. Derrick Broze is going to be with us, and he's going to tell his personal story. I don't know if you all know him. Many of you probably know of him and his work all over the place, asserting freedom and rights in various different directions and all over the place. But you may not have known that he has not had a driver's license for 12 years. And so we're going to hear a story about how that came to be, and then what it's been like all these years traveling on the byways and highways without a driver's license. I need to check it. This might actually be our 2-year anniversary. I'm not, if it's not, it's our 23rd month in a row. We're definitely making this a regular thing, and we focus on free travel. But because travel is so central to asserting our freedoms, it is very important that we do that in this time. But if people who think that maybe it's not as important as other things like maybe income tax or avoiding vaccine mandates or a thousand other things where the government interferes in our lives. But what we find in the story of the DMV or the motor vehicle codes in your state, the right to travel has in it all of the elements that you will find in any government scheme where they try to take our natural rights from us and exchange it for a privilege and try to then charge us for the privilege and regulate us as if we are their servants and they're not our servants. So when we study the elements of free travel, it has application all across the board. And typically our conversations do end up spreading toward the end of the calls. Typically we end up going a little bit further afield from free travel, but we're going to start out with the first hour talking with Derrick Broze, and we'll take your Q&A. And then in the second hour, more or less, we'll talk about your issues, what you're dealing with, if you've gotten any traffic citations, if you're going to court anytime soon, and then we can support one another in exchanging information and advice and support in lots of different ways. Hey, David, how's it going? It looks like you're driving.
No, I am traveling, Clint. Great to be with you all. One of the key distinctions is driving is a commercial term used to transport persons or property for commerce, for profit. And I'm traveling my private ways for a private matter, but I am in motion here. It's a great joy to be with you and the audience. And of course, Derrick Broze, one of the champions. I'm very excited to hear his full story about driving with no license for 12 years. I didn't know it was that long, but I did hear about that. I think it was the 2022 Exit and Build Land Summit where he dropped that bomb. I said, awesome, man. So I can't wait to hear the story. And for some of the audience members out here, some people might not have the courage to go without a license, but as you mentioned, we get like traffic citations and these types of ways. And so this community knows that you're allowed to travel on the roads in your own private means, not a vehicle, but a private conveyance or automobile, right? All the words, right? We're learning about conscious language, the language that they put in our schooling, in the media, so they can extort us. And as you said before, we've been taught that we serve them, and in fact, they're supposed to serve us. If the Constitution was legitimate, that would be the case. But there's a great self-ownership awakening, brothers and sisters, and that's what's so exciting. I'm so grateful that Clint, you and I got to do this for, I think it is close to 2 years. Every month we gather, there's courses, there's great conversations, how to maybe sue these people, and we're looking for solutions in this amazing totalitarian agenda that is just getting to expand and grow. And it starts with courage and truth, peace and love, and the great things of humanity. So I'm really excited to be with you guys and maybe ask some questions and hear some of your guys' questions. And I hope you take advantage, because Derrick's one of the champions of freedom on the planet, in my opinion, doing a lot of great things. We just had the event down there in Mexico, the Graders Reset, and he shared the news. It's now the People's Reset. So no matter what they try to say, we outnumber these people, and we come with honest intentions And it's just a beautiful time to be alive. So it's great to be with you, Clint and Derrick and everybody. Looking forward to a great call.
Absolutely. Well, let me introduce Derrick by way of some of his endeavors here. You're looking at The Greater Reset. It's a series of conferences, and you can check it out at thegreaterreset.org. A really visionary effort, if you ask me, to get people to physically get together and share all of the wide variety of conversations that we need to have in order to reestablish our sovereignty. And then we have as well his journalistic work, which is really great, that he's teamed up with Whitney Webb and is doing articles for The Last American Vagabond. The Last American Vagabond is a wonderful journal outlet, and you can see here that Derrick has been hot on the topic of the fluoride trial. We're suing the EPA to end fluoridation. And in fact, that's why, in a way, that we're here together, Derrick, because we ran into each other there. It's a case that's happening right here in my hometown of San Francisco in federal court. And it's a really unusual trial. Maybe we'll end up talking about it only because you and I are thick deep in it since every single day we've been in the courthouse since last Wednesday, listening to testimony from experts about the effects of fluoridation chemicals on the developing brain, the brain of the fetus even, and then the newborn babies. And then there's the Conscious Resistance Freedom Cell Network. I'd love to maybe hear a little bit about where that stands these days. It's really important for freedom lovers to get together, network with one another, officially network with one another. But your book is called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. What a perfect title for our times. That's exactly what we're dealing with. Derrick, I want you to introduce yourself because I just did what I could do, but there's just so much to say. Maybe you want to introduce yourself anew, or like tell us about, you're a spirit. Who are you really?
Sure. But yeah, my name is Derrick Broze. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I've been living in Mexico, Morelia, Mexico, central Mexico, since March 2020, when I pretty quickly realized what was about to happen and, decided to advance some plans I had to go to Mexico and build a community. So I live between Texas and Mexico now. And as was mentioned, I'm an independent journalist. I run LastAmericanVagabond.com, producing weekly articles, documentaries, podcasts, interviews, essays, articles, written some books on a variety of topics about freedom and spirituality and solutions. Most importantly, everything I do tends to focus on solutions. So you heard about the Greater Reset. We call it the Greater Reset Activation because it's meant to activate, inspire, motivate people. Been hosting that since January 2021. I launched it a couple months after we heard the Great Reset from the World Economic Forum, and decided that myself and Freedom Cell Network, some colleagues and friends, decided we wanted to be able to help direct these various health, freedom, sovereignty, conspiracy, reality, whatever you want to call these various intersecting movements, try to be the ones in those movements to say, hey, maybe we should focus our energy on what we actually want for 2030 and beyond, instead of just obsessing over what quote unquote they are doing, which is important. Obviously, as a journalist, I write about some of the problems of the world, but I also try to, again, through the journalism, help wake people up, and then through my books, my essays, my public speeches, and my more philosophical work and the Greater Reset, push people towards solutions. What can we actually do in the areas of food and technology and mental, physical, spiritual health? And so a lot of my work is focused on that. And just a little more background. Part of the reason that my message is centered around that, and the reason my website is called The Conscious Resistance, is because my sort of I guess awakening, you could say, started prior to getting involved in politics and journalism. I've been doing this since 2010 when I first started kind of waking up on these ways. I watched an Alex Jones documentary, read a book by Ron Paul, heard Ron Paul speak at University of Houston, a couple of other things within a matter of a week or two, and it just kind of shattered my paradigm. And I was, in a place where I was very receptive and open, because I was about a year and a half out of prison. And I got arrested when I was 20 years old. I got addicted to drugs pretty much right out of high school, after spending a lot of my young life dealing with depression, suicide attempts. That eventually led to drug and alcohol abuse after I graduated from high school. And, I went straight into college. I actually graduated early from college, from high school, but nobody knew that about me. They just knew me as the wild kid getting into fights and getting arrested and all that sort of stuff as I was trying to navigate all these intense emotions and stuff I was dealing with. Because I actually come from a family, at least 3 generations back on the Broze side of my family, my father's side of drugs, alcohol, prison, and suicide, going back at least 3 generations, including my birth father. So I grew up visiting him in prison, and this was a very big part of my life. So when I got locked up, I was very determined to like figure out why the heck I was there, what I needed to do to never go back. And I really dove into prayer and meditation. I just started, I started meditating, getting into specifically Zen Buddhism, and I had my grandmother, who is a very big spiritual influence on my life, send me books about prayer, about Buddhism, and I was just opening up and just starting to explore where previously I had been very shut off and like, F God, I don't care about religion or spirituality or anything. I was just very angry. So while I was locked up in 2005, and then back and forth, I went until eventually I got out October 2008. In that time, I was starting to do a lot of inner work, starting to try to build some form of relationship with my father and starting to heal. So as I said earlier, by the time I got out, October 2008, I'm a felon now in the state of Texas. I'm having to navigate that, but I'm also the happiest I've ever been in my life. I mean, this depression had lifted, the drug abuse had lifted, and I felt this like renewed thirst for life. And I was also going to the library all the time, trying to apply for jobs as a felon. And I just started checking out library books. And one of the first books I ever voluntarily took notes on without, being assigned to do so was called Cannabis: A History. And it was all about the drug war. And having just got out related to drugs, it was just very interesting to me. It was also information I never learned about, that cannabis specifically was made illegal. Definitely there was some racism involved. There was the hemp industry being pushed out of the market. There was all kinds of funny stuff. And so I learned all about that history. And again, that sort of just sparked even more thirst in me of like, wow, I want to know more. What else is going on? And then I end up getting introduced to an Alex Jones documentary and hearing Ron Paul and all the things I mentioned. So I say all that to say that for me, my message, including with what we're going to talk about today, travel, opting out of systems, is very much one that believes that we also need to evolve as individual people and collectively, but it starts with the individual. I try to start as local as I can. That's inside here, right? So I believe that even if we create new systems, parallel economies, alternative systems of governance, and we recognize we have the right to travel and do all these beautiful things, that even if we do that, but we don't do the internal work, because each of us, no matter how we present, each have our own doubts, fears, insecurities, and things and the more of an effort we put to processing from and overcoming and growing through those things, that the more evolved we are as human beings. And I believe that process is necessary for us to really get to a place where we can create a new world that will respect bodily autonomy, individual sovereignty, individual liberty. I think some of us are already ready for it, but the masses clearly are not ready for it. So my message is very much one that says, yes, we need to be aware of what's going on in the world and understand how their system works and understand the legalese and the scientific jargon and be able to decipher it. But there's also this, what I call the struggle against your own internal tyrant, your doubts, fears, and insecurities. And so to me, the conscious resistance is recognizing that to build a more free, just, and ethical world, both sides of this coin are important. The exposing the darkness in the physical realm and trying to build better systems, and the inner work as well, and trying to build better internal systems, if you will. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow, I'm so inspired. I'm about to cry. Just stories of renewal and transformation like that always just get me, because it proves that there are miracles and that we can transform it. There is a higher power that can intervene in our lives and somehow tickle our conscience to wake us up and put us on the right course. And you are such an example. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Wow. Amen. Hallelujah. I'm done. We're done. That's it. That's all we need to talk about. If that's all we talked about, folks, I mean, really is the most local. I love that. That's a quotable I'm taking from this conversation, because I advocate for local action. There's nothing more local than right here, right, David?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, man. It is. It's great, man. You see, it's the energetic thing, And Derrick, you always bring such good energy, and that's what people need. We've seen many of these documentaries, and it's like it's depressing. But what you've been doing the last few years is like raising the energy and putting some positive images out there and words. It's like, yeah, they got a lot of money and they have a lot of things, but we have the spirit, we have I think the goodness. And yeah, it's gonna be very excited to hear how you've been doing it for 12 years, because that's what we want to do here. We would love, actually, one of our guys, Stephen Milani, I think the last name is, he's the model anarchist on Instagram. He has a dream, and he promoted this, was it 2 months ago, Clint, to take off your plates November 5th, 2024. And it happens to be the 5th of November, an election day. So there is this energy that's surging, and we want to learn, and how you've done it, and how you've gone about that. I know it's not easy, and I've been arrested a few times myself and exercising my freedoms, but I think there's a little bit of a badge of honor in standing up for what's right. And if they incarcerate us or do something wrong, well, this is almost kind of the price that we got to pay to help humanity evolve, because it's been going on for a long time and people are starting to come out of their slumber. So I'm excited to hear about your journey and wherever Clint wants to start to see how you've been doing it.
Thank you,
Well,
Broze.
yeah, I got a little bit of the story from you, Derrick, but why don't you start from the beginning? What, because like for a lot of people, they take on this free traveler activity very consciously, and they choose strategically how they're going to do it and when, and plan it all out. I don't think it was so planned in your case, was it?
No, it wasn't. And I'll share a bit about what I've done in this kind of realm of activism, if you will. And David, I'm glad you're here. Actually, I didn't know you were going to be here, brother, but great to see you. And I'm glad that you also mentioned that you have been arrested before and dealt with tickets, and because I think it's important to, for one, just always start out with that reality. If you're talking about anything in terms of trying to opt out of some of these systems that we're told are mandatory or compulsory, that the reality is that at the moment the systems that are surrounding us, whether we believe they're just or not, which I think it's clear they're not just, are controlled by people with guns who control the courts, who control the police, who so that even the best laid plans, if you are the kind of person that does put a lot. Well, so let me just say this as well. I have at my home right now in Mexico, I have a stack of papers and books that I've been given just in my travels for various people. And I'm not making a judgment on any of them because I haven't had time to look through all of them, but various people who are all in the kind of common law, sovereign law. I know sovereign citizen's an oxymoron, but you guys know what I'm talking about, who I will meet on the road and say, Derrick, you talk a lot about opting out, but this is the one way. You need to understand this thing. All you have to do is, and then here's the program, whatever it may be. People should always be aware that, we can never predict how the people with guns, from the police to the state agents or whatever, are going to respond to anything, right? And so I would just never want to give anybody a false impression that there's any system out there. This is at least my belief. Maybe you guys know different, but that there's any system that can 100% protect you from the cop, the man on the street. Because, when it comes to discussing like what we know as free people we are owed, and what we are actually able to do, and what plays out in reality, we know that often those two things conflict because the systems have been hijacked by people with their own ideas. So I just want to add that in there. And yeah, and if you're interested in more of my work on kind of opting out of systems beyond what we're going to focus on travel today, but just more broadly, everybody here can download my book at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. You can buy physical copies, but you can also download the PDF for free if you like to check it out. And some of what I'm going to cover today is in there. So in terms of travel, as I mentioned with the story I was sharing earlier about going to prison and kind of getting out, got into all that trouble at like 18. I remember I got a bank account and I screwed that up. I overdrafted. So I just decided never to have a bank account again. I was like, all right, I don't think I'm ready for dealing with banks. And then years later, as I started to wake up, I would have more skepticism towards banks for deeper philosophical reasons, like the Federal Reserve and other systems like that. And so it seemed to kind of work out where I was like, oh, wow, life kind of took me in this direction. And that sort of aligned with my beliefs today. It kind of happened in a similar way to traveling, because after going to prison and doing that whole back and forth, they suspended my license in 2008 when I was released. They suspended it as a consequence of my overall sentence, even though I did my time and all that stuff. And it's now been almost 20 years. The state of Texas believes that I owe them about $10,000 for me to be able to drive on their roads again, right? So, and of course, driving under their terms, as somebody said earlier. So I just refused to pay that. I just said, all right, well, I guess I'm done. I'll just never have a license again legally. It doesn't mean I'm going to stop driving. And I've just kind of, I've owned I think I told you I owned an RV for a couple of years, and I actually traveled around this RV all over the United States. I think we probably ran into each other then during COVID. David, we did this tour. We did a 50-city tour across the U.S., traveling for 60 days in an RV that I bought right before, that I bought in Texas, that had California plates on it from some previous owner. I had no title to it. I never registered it, had no tags or anything, and I was driving with no license. And we were only stopped one time traveling around, and it wasn't related really to any of that. It was the cops messing with us, claiming we were driving through the Midwest, that this was a corridor where there was a lot of fentanyl, and so we looked suspicious or something. I don't know. They just used it as an excuse, and that was kind of a rough incident, which I can share more about, because I think it is important for people to think again in terms of how you deal with the inevitable police interaction if you're out there being a free person, you know. And in this case, I over the years, I mean, and again, this is not about a badge of honor necessarily for me. Like David said, maybe sometimes we do need to go through some things in order to help reach more people or wake more people up, but I don't want to see anybody get hurt, you know. And I don't necessarily know if us sacrificing ourselves really helps anything in the end, you know. I mean, we can point to different examples of people who now are rotting in prison cells, and the tyranny marches on. So I think it's debatable whether or not you know, putting yourselves on the line is worth it. But I say that to say, I have been arrested. I have been ticketed. I have been, you know, I've had things go wrong. I've had it where, you know, me asserting my rights ends up with me in a jail cell. And, you know, other times where I realize like I'm being screwed over, I'm being mistreated by this law enforcement officer. But if I keep pushing this, I'm probably going to go to jail. And I didn't want to do that at the time. So I backed off. You know, I wish it wasn't that way. But sometimes you got to play your cards right and know when to try different strategies or how to go about it. Because again, knowing the law better than them doesn't necessarily guarantee a victory if victory means staying free, you know, being like not put in a cell. So yeah, just want to kind of be real about that. So after 2008, when my license got suspended, I just never renewed it. I've owned a couple of vehicles since then. I do live when I was living in Houston, I live in the inner city. So I actually didn't drive a whole lot, other than, I mean, Houston's kind of urban sprawl. So we did drive. My partner, she has a vehicle, but I would just take public transportation. I would bike. And then when I did drive, I just refused to get an ID, a license. And there have been times when I've been pulled over. You know, there's a difference between driving without your license on you and driving with a suspended license, because a suspended license is actually, they say, an arrestable offense, at least in Texas. So by driving around without a license, or with a suspended license, as opposed to, oh, I just don't have one, or I forgot it at home, I do risk arrest. And it is what it is. But I've kind of dealt with that reality. It's just, for me now, again, everybody has to make a different choice. If you're a mother of 3 kids and you've got all kinds of stuff going on, maybe this isn't a gamble you want to make, don't want to make. I've had friends who have driven for years without paperwork, who have no paperwork for their children, who've crossed borders. But over times of doing that for years, they realize, wow, I'm getting harassed so much to try to make it through this. Yes, technically I get by without the papers, but I have to sit there for an hour and answer 100 different questions about my entire life to satisfy them that I am who I say and that my kids are who they are. And, you have to kind of weigh those options of like, is this worth the time, the stress? Again, sometimes you will be like, yeah, I'm going to stand my ground and I'm going to push back here and assert my rights and be in the right, because I know I'm in the right. Other times, maybe you're like, this is, I got to get the kids to school. I don't have time for this battle. I'm going to suck it up and deal with whatever this cop's saying. But overall, I mean, and I did joke about this to you, Clint, and I guess it's a joke, but there's some truth in every joke, right? And part of it is that this is just whoever it makes sense to, it makes sense. I've also learned the art of just being invisible and Jedi mind tricks, and just really, I mean, truly just not even in my head, the idea that they're seeing me, that I'm doing anything wrong. Like there's no reason for me to be driving around, like looking over my shoulder constantly. I mean, I do still have I think, a little bit of a stigma of police. Not that I hate all cops or anything like that, but just from being in prison, where when I see a cop, I do tense up here and there, like maybe from a distance. I'm like, oh, wait, I have nothing to hide. Everything's fine. I can relax, right? But I don't spend my time, looking over my shoulder, worried about that. I just don't even invite that idea into my reality. Again, I'm not stupid though. I know things can happen, but generally speaking, that's my secret strategy. I just don't think about it. I don't practice it. So there's nothing special really that I'm doing, so sorry to disappoint anyone. Like I don't have a specific program. Again, my book talks more about opting out of systems in a more philosophical and practical way, but I don't ascribe just yet, although I'm interested to learn more about what you guys are doing, to any particular system, or these are the strategies to take, or pull out this card and show them this, or pull out your paperwork or whatever. Like I've seen all those things. I just kind of exist like a free man, and I don't really, just bother with them too much. And my interactions with government are very limited. I know we're on a private call here, so I can say like I don't have a relationship with this. I don't have a relationship with a lot of these institutions, and I just live my life. I stay out of their hands. I don't fill out their paperwork as much as possible.
What's that line from Star Wars?
You're not the droids we're looking for.
I don't know. Everyone gets that reference. It's so great.
Yeah, that's literally, we'll be in the car and like, hey, cops are looking our way, and I'll just kind of jokingly, but again, whoever wants to join in just in the car, be like, all right, guys, all together now. We're not the droids you're looking for. They can't see us. We're just totally fine and everything's good. And, whenever I actually have to deal with somebody, I think you stand in what you know. And unfortunately, there has been now for a decade plus so much propaganda out about people talking like we're talking today. And police departments are being fed federal bulletins saying people talking about their rights could be threats, this and that. So you do got to be careful that some of these officers have been trained. Like when you start coming out like, hey, I'm so-and-so in the private, or let me pull out my paperwork, they might already be thinking, oh, this is one of those people we've been told these folks are maybe domestic terrorists or extremists or dangerous. So, just be aware that the other person, whoever you may be eventually communicating these things to, especially a law enforcement officer, could already be primed to think you're nuts, and that's part of the problem, of course.
Yes, we played a training video. Actually, I think it's a sheriff somewhere in Florida did this kind of expensive production where they go through the whole thing and they show some camera angles from a cop car where a guy gets shot. A cop gets shot, and they really scare these cops into thinking that we're a threat, and it works. It really does. It works. So they're two steps ahead, immunizing themselves against our assertions of freedom. And I'm gonna call them henchmen. I don't mean any disrespect, but at one level, that's really all they are henchmen. And they'll even say it. They'll say the words, "I'm just doing my job," or "I'm just following orders." And they'll say those words, and they won't even be self-reflective enough to hear themselves and recognize that it's in direct contravention to their oath of office, which is more important, one would think, your sacred word, versus some sort of administrative policy that's been rolled out, or some sort of, as you're saying, fear campaign to make them think that we're the enemy. So congratulations on all your successes. And I do believe that if magically somehow, Derrick, if all of us were somehow just able to throw off the mental confines that we have in terms of worrying about law enforcement, if we were just purely in our own souls, in our own minds, completely free, I believe that that would pretty much undo a lot of their tyranny. I really do. It's a mental game at
I
at
agree.
a lot of levels.
I share a couple more things just
Please.
about this idea, but kind of take it a little broader.
Mhm.
So again, I want to mention my book just for anybody who wants to check it out. This is not me trying to sell it to you. It's downloadable for free. I just think you guys will probably benefit from what I have in there. And just a little background on it before I share about how this connects to our travel conversation. I published this book in January 2020, January 30th, 2020. I wrote it in late 2019, and it's part call to action. It's part philosophy, and it's very much a get your shit together because some horrible things are on the horizon and we need to figure out how we're going to navigate that. So as I said, I wrote it in 2019, and I was writing it originally just as a journalist who myself, I was leaked back in 2013 images and documentation showing that I had been under surveillance by the Houston Police Department for some of my activism, not doing anything illegal, building community gardens and hosting benefit shows. But I had a law enforcement officer actually reach out to me and share this information with me, two different officers over 6 months. And from then, I just started to dive into, okay, I was told I have a criminal intelligence officer assigned to me that's following me around downtown or something of that sort. So I figured I needed to learn everything I could about surveillance. What does that even mean to be under surveillance by the police department? And, what should I be looking out for? And so I did a deep dive into the various types of technology that most major police departments in the United States have. I'm sure San Francisco, actually, I was just reading an article about the amount of footage that San Francisco has collected in the last year in their, I think it's called global or surveillance, live surveillance. I can't remember. But anyways, nonetheless, I started investigating all these different tools, and I found out that the Houston Police Department had cell phone surveillance tools called Stingrays, facial recognition tools. And I've just been researching this for years, and there have been lawyers and digital rights groups since at least 2016 and 2017 saying AI, facial recognition, these things are moving very fast, and we need to have a conversation. There's lawyers groups been calling for years saying we need to put a pause, a moratorium on the development of this technology until governments can catch up. Because at the moment, by the way, there's only one U.S. state that has any kind of protections for facial, for what's called your face print, and that's Illinois. The rest of the states have no regulation, no rules on how governments or private bodies can be taking our face prints from anywhere on the internet and using them. There's a company called Clearview AI that has the largest private database of face prints in the world, bigger than the FBI's own database. So I've been watching this stuff for years and just trying to think, like, how do people like us who care about privacy, who care about freedom, and want to hold on to that for coming generations, how are we going to navigate this world that is very quickly emerging? Digital surveillance, artificial intelligence controlling facial recognition, social credit scores, digital IDs. These are concepts that a lot more people are familiar with now post-COVID. But when I was writing this in 2019, not so many people were paying attention. And so I published this about a month before we heard the word COVID-19. And it just kind of happened to be the right time, because a lot of the things I was talking about, not predicting, but just writing about, happened and came true in the form of lockdowns and other things, digital IDs, of course, as vaccine passports. So I wrote an update to this book last year. There's 5 new chapters, post-COVID chapters, based on everything that I learned through our network, the Freedom Cell Network, from people who around the world who sent me their stories about how they avoided lockdowns, how they avoided travel restrictions, how they were trying to navigate vaccine mandates and passports, and some from like Australia and some of the other parts of the world that were really, really messed up in lockdown. I know San Francisco was pretty tough for a lot of people as well. And just trying to, gather all that crowdsourced information and put it into this. So again, this book is part philosophy of talking about the ideas, the philosophy that I think, the strategy that I think can help us get past this, which is to build new parallel systems. And also here's everything I did to become debanked. Here's everything there's like step 1, step 2, step 3. So there's a lot of practical information there as well. And I want you guys to check that out. But what I want to say in terms of traveling is that I think ultimately the bigger picture that ties into what I focus on already is building parallel alternative systems where the free mode of travel that we know is true and is right and is just are recognized. And this could look a number of different ways. This could be, people that are, like, for example, there's many people in the freedom communities trying to get their own land now in different parts of the world and say, we're going to establish a network of free communities. That's something I'm a part of, that I'm trying to help establish. We could have, eventually you have contiguous pieces of land owned by different people, or some different kind of shared housing where you end up with a number of communities spread out over various geographic area. And within those areas, we start to create our own roads and our own travel systems that these rights to free travel are recognized. There's no US license and all this sort of stuff. So that's one idea. That in the bigger picture, because I'm always trying to think of what is the solution, right? And right now we're trying to educate ourselves and get people to be more aware. You have this right exists. They shouldn't be able to do this. Okay, we establish that, we recognize that, we grow our numbers, but what comes next? How do we actually put that in practice? Right now we're kind of under duress because we go out on their roads and they could pull us over, they could put you in a cage, they can do all kinds of things if they so believe that you have violated their laws, what they believe to be just. But if we're going to build parallel systems or alternative systems, I mean, you're either going to try to take the system back politically and put in the good guys that are going to recognize these rights. Personally, I don't see a lot of faith in the political system. I don't think real long-lasting change is going to come through that. On the local level, sure. Local level, maybe you start chipping away at some of these things, but I don't see like, yes, let's just elect a new president and all of a sudden this among the millions of other problems are going to get solved. So for me personally, I don't put a lot of effort into political energy. I did run for mayor a couple of times, but that was about reaching people, not because I had faith in the system. I don't think violence is the answer. We're not going to force people to, violently to give us our right to travel freely, that's not a solution either, right? So then we start thinking, well, what are realistic solutions? Education, you guys are already doing that. You're already focused on how to educate more people, how to grow the movement. So you're sustaining something. But the real solution is to put these rights into practice, or at least from my perspective, that would be the ultimate expression, right? Not just knowing we're free people and we have the right to travel, and every now and then I get away with it when I'm on the man's roads, but being able to truly freely live that and just moving about. I think it's going to take for us to create our own systems, our own ways of being outside of theirs. And I very much believe that that's the time that we're living in right now, as these folks and this broader agenda are pushing towards Agenda 2030, Great Reset, these kind of complete totalitarian technocratic control. More and more of us are saying, no, that's not the future I want. No, I will not own nothing and be miserable. I want to, live amongst like-minded people. I want to have clean air, clean food, clean water, these kinds of things. And I think that we're really just at this early stages, and which is a beautiful thing. We get to be a part of it. We get to create it, of people who are breaking away and trying to create new systems outside of this mainstream system that we have all been kind of born into, and essentially told this is the way things are, right? Like more and more of us are saying, no, we don't want things to be that way. We're going to try to actually live the way we want, not just go our lives accepting somebody else's reality being forced on us. So I know that was a little bit long-winded, but my point is, I think that is really maybe where some of these different movements could start trying to focus our energy. And I don't claim to have the perfect solution. We're clearly in the early stages of this. In my book, I talk about this strategy of counter economics, building counter economies, parallel economies. Like that's one way, but that doesn't have to do just with money. Travel is a form of commerce, and there's economy. It's your actions, right? We need to have parallel systems to everything they do. Education, healthcare. Obviously, more people know that. We're talking about travel here, big tech, getting off big tech, helping people recognize that I have a friend who has a company that sells privacy cell phones and laptops. There's so many solutions out there for us to put our time, money, and energy into parallel systems that aren't just going to be Google technocratic control, accepting their law, accepting their vaccines, accepting all their fluoride. And, there are alternatives. And I think it's just about, for one, educating more people about them, and then us putting our money where our mouth is and actually shifting as much as possible, step by step, to get out of these systems. And not only because I think that is a realistic solution to trying to create a better way, but if you don't get out of their systems in the coming years, there will be no way out. You will be locked in with the digital ID, and every one of your assets will be tied to that. And you'll be like, oh, I knew this was coming, but I chose not to act. And here I am. I guess I'll accept the CBDC, digital ID, whatever. So not chastising anybody, just saying like, let's really focus. It's 2024. These people are very much working to transform the world in the kind of broader picture. And your right to travel is tied into all of this. But for me, it's like the bigger answer, the bigger picture is like, let's build new systems. And I don't have the answers for all that, but I'm sure one of you brilliant minds are already working on something great. And, it's just about supporting each other. Those of us who see that we need something new, something different from what we've been handed.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yes. You're very sensible, and your assessment of the situation we're in is right on. You aren't getting ahead of ourselves, so to speak. Oftentimes people look back with some romance at the American Revolution, and they point to that kind of solution where we take up arms and we form, communities and our own government separate from a tyrannical oppressor. But I don't know if it really maps to the 21st century so easily. And we're also at least 100 years, depending on how you measure it. But, the industrial era began a real schism between the people and the common bonds of relationships that people had at one time. And we've been for the duration of everyone's lifetime who's present here today, at least, we've been raised in a situation where our every activity has been mediated by some institution, an enormous institution, whether it's banks or tech companies or telecom companies or in these intelligence agencies, even state governments, all the various states, enormous states, even the media and everybody else is there's been a huge consolidation across industries, and so you know, we're very much conditioned to do things already through big institutions. And it's going to be a real shift in consciousness for us to look at each other and remember how we can trust one another, how we can create mutually beneficial relationships, whether that's commercial or otherwise, to be able to really form bonds between us where we don't need those other institutions to mediate everything we do. It's a big deal. So
It's a
let's
big
have
job.
some, yeah, so let's have some questions and or comments. What do you think, Derrick?
Yeah, totally open for it.
Our head's been deep into this fluoride courtroom. And if you want to read about it, folks, go to the Last American Vagabond under Derrick Broze. He's live tweeting. You can watch it and follow him on X Twitter. So you can see what's going on like minute by minute in the courtroom. But to get the overall, what's really going on, what's at stake here, you can read about it, read his articles there and his interviews with some of our experts who've been testifying about the neurotoxic effects of fluoride. But I was curious if maybe you had any reflections tonight when you combine the conversation about free travel with the notion of water. Because the one thing that occurs to me that kind of overlaps is that the roadways belong to us. They are a common good, we share them. And the waterworks are likewise something that we all share. I mean, I don't know if I could build my own aqueduct from the Sierra Mountains to come just to my kitchen and have my independent water system. We have to work together, and we have this
Absolutely.
shared utility, it's called. But do you see any like maybe philosophical or legal or lawful distinctions that are similar between the two that might inform one or the other?
That's an interesting question. Water obviously is life, and we all need it to survive. So it seems to be like, for example, where I live in Mexico, we have land just outside the city, and the water on our property, there's two fresh springs that flows straight from the mountain. There's like a long tube that the people who've been there before have installed at some point, and it crosses over different people's land, but it's pretty much held in common there between everybody. Everybody kind of has like a verbal agreement of like, take what you need, but be aware of other people using it. And I'm thinking for up to, obviously we're the new people on the block. So, but it seems like their system has been working. And so it seems like you can find situations like that. And definitely in the past, you could find situations like that where people understood that water was a common thing. And so we should take care of it and respect it for each other. Obviously, that's not always the case here in our modern world. There's so many polluted bodies of water in cities and around cities. And, sometimes, especially in poverty, when you don't have anywhere else to dump your water, or dump your trash, people start dumping into oceans, and that goes down the line and that gets people sick. So clearly we understand that this is something that does have a collective impact on all of us. So like you said, we have to work together to preserve our waterways, but also to make sure we can drink water. And then I do think that the roads the roads as they're built, like if we're talking about the U.S. federal highway system, I guess some people would say, hey, this is owned by the U.S. government, but of course, government doesn't create anything. It all comes back from taxpayers. So our parents and grandparents and whoever was around when they first started building the freeways, they're the taxpayers that paid for this road. There's still tolls that they have told us in different parts we're only going to be for a few years and they never go away, right? So clearly the taxpayers have some claim to the road because that's where all the funds and everything comes to make it happen. So I think there is a similar argument for a kind of collective, I don't know if ownership is the right word, but collective use of the roads, and that the government shouldn't be able to restrict it. But I mean, this is unfortunately just another area where their belief in using force and violence in the form of putting you in cages with men with guns is what backs up their authority. That's really all it comes down to. We can recognize, hey, I have the right to travel and move about, but they're going to do what they will. Now, just one other thing that comes to mind as you're asking about water. Water is, again, obviously a very important resource. There's a lot of groups like the World Economic Forum and the UN predicting that there's going to be water wars in the future. They've talked about wanting to use tokens, and I'm into crypto to some degree, but I think there's a really dangerous side of it too. They're talking about wanting to tokenize water, and it would basically be like if you don't have your water token tied to your carbon wallet and your digital ID, then you can't collect your water ration today. It could get to that point. And they talk about this idea for for refugees and like refugee camps. The UN has discussed these ideas. There's a really great article that just came out by Whitney Webb for Bitcoin Magazine about this, about the tokenization of natural resources. So this is definitely something we need to be aware of as well. We need to find ways to make sure that we have access to clean water. And again, that sounds easier said than done, because especially in a highly populated area like this, like you were saying, Clint, like you can't just go to the mountains and you can't pipe it all the way that I can in the land out there in that part of Mexico. And that's also not reasonable for everybody in the city we live near, right? So having access to water, protecting that, and making sure that that's something that everybody has access to is equally as important as making sure we have the right to travel about. And we saw with COVID that restricting travel and restricting movement is very much a part of these folks' toolkit.
Yes, yes. Water scarcity, scary. Thank you very much, Derrick. Let's take our first question from Krista.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for your story. It's great to hear it, and it's good to be with everybody. So I have a couple of questions, actually, and some thoughts. I'm always a believer, and I don't know if you are, that like it's not often what we say, but how we say it. And getting by with certain individuals in places of authority. I have found that if I soften the edges a little bit, but I'm still honest and truthful, sometimes we find our way into their heart rather than their mind, where they're being told what to do or how to do it. Does that make any sense? Just kind of a
Absolutely.
thought. Yeah.
No,
And so
absolutely.
I always feel like I've got to remember what to do. I have to know the universal uniform code 10.3, whatever, write this right and do all these things. But I'm afraid I'll freeze and my mind will go stupid because we all have fog mind right now. So I'm often thinking like, how can I just be nice and meet this guy at a place, or this woman at a place where they don't want to be in the mess they're in either. If that makes any sense. Because I think
I
we're
think that's
all
a
in
great,
this.
great point.
Yeah. Anyhow,
Yeah,
there's
I
some,
was just gonna add to that real
sure,
quick, if you don't mind.
sure.
Just that as I mentioned earlier, I've been arrested before, and it's for some of the situation, maybe times where I didn't soften the edges as much as I could have, like you were kind of saying, where I was exercising my rights and expressing myself and totally, lawfully within my bounds. But yeah, at the same time, maybe people are going to be more receptive to a different way instead of yelling about your rights or um, immediately stepping things to the aggressive level, and I try to always meet everybody with like the soft, from a soft place, like you said, especially from the beginning. If you're in a situation where it's like, okay, here comes a cop, and like you said, you're thinking, oh, do I have all my codes right? And I got just meet them as a human being and try to go from there. And sometimes that works. There are other times whenever the human being in me was meeting a demon and they did not have any compassion within them, and they was just ready to take things to the next level. And you still, try to meet them as softly as you can, because I don't think it helps anybody to then accelerate and to try to, hey, they're meeting me at this level, so I'm going to go even beyond that, right? And instead try to bring in some of that empathy and compassion, because a lot of times that really will smooth things down to a level where you can actually achieve some real communication.
Love that. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so the second part was I spent all day in a seminar just like last week, and honestly, I cannot remember who was hosting it, but they had speakers all over the place, and a lot of them were on common law. And one of the things they kept bringing up in a book I just actually had a friend get from Amazon, because I won't go on Amazon anymore. I refuse to. Um, it's called Grand Jury Awake, Tactical Civics. Are you familiar with this concept of grand jury?
Is it related to nullification, or is it like just in general using grand juries to try to subpoena?
I
I've
think it's
heard people
about
talking about grand juries in a
creating
few different ways.
I think it might be about creating local governments. I don't know. That's why I'm about to get the book and I'm going to read it, because what they were talking about, it seemed that it was about how we come together, say on these lands and in these groups, and how we create our own government, and we really operate from that place, and how I think you can have up to 26 grand jurors in one state, and they
What
have
was the book called?
it's called Grand Jury Awake, Tactical Civics. It's by a gentleman named David Zuniga, Szuniga. And anyhow,
All right.
if anyone knows about it, I really love to hear more about it. I'm about to get it and want to read about it, but I think it's an important book. At least everyone was talking about it on this. And one other thing I wanted to share with everyone that I just watched that you can find on YouTube. And it was one of the most interesting things I've watched on a psychological level so that we can understand the tactics of what we're up against. Do you all know Napoleon Hill?
Yes.
Think and Grow Rich was his original book. Well, he put together a book called Outwitting the Devil. And I have to tell you, I have learned more from listening to 4 hours of that than I've learned in 4 years of psychology. So anyhow, I'm just saying it to the group, like it's Napoleon Hill, Outwitting the Devil. It's on YouTube. You don't even have to buy it. It's worth a listen. It's a conversation with the devil, and it's how to outbeat him. And I think it's just a really worthwhile thing. But anyhow, thank you for your time and thank you for your story. And I thought maybe I would bring this grand jury thing up and you might know something about it. I'm just so curious as to how we're going to kind of bring our own government together because I feel like, reseating our own local governments is going to be super important if we're going to keep living in the towns that we're living in.
Well, thank you for sharing about that. I look forward to diving in, learning about it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hey, Clint, I want to make a comment here. I'm so glad you said, Derrick, that violence is not the answer because we do have guns, but violence just begets more violence. And so I think to the spiritual question of somebody's got to have compassion, someone's got to forgive. And when we get pulled over, whether you have no plates or no license, as you said, is to meet them as a human. And there's a approach by Robert Landon called the moral approach. And I had a successful encounter that's on my Freedom Law Academy YouTube channel. And it's basically letting the cop know, first of all, it's understanding where the line is. And I was arrested multiple times for failing to ID. So like you did, you choose your battles. And now after, multiple arrests, I'm like, okay, so I don't want to sleep on a concrete bed tonight. I'd like to sleep in my own bed tonight. And ultimately, he says, you give me your passport. And I said, if I don't give you my passport, what are you going to do to me? And then he started to articulate that he's going to arrest me or detain me. I said, okay, so you're going to use violence against a peaceful man. Okay, in that case, I am happy to identify myself out of fear, right? So I put the passport on the window and I said, but I know you're a good guy. So you're a good guy, but the politicians are making you do this. And I'm a good guy, the politicians are making me do this. So we're both victims of politicians. So victims shouldn't fight victims. Wouldn't you agree? Anyways, it was like a 30-minute encounter, and I had a suspended license at the time and no plates on my car. And he let me go with just a warning. So I think there is merit to what you said about finding the humanity in them because they're humans. And as you said, Clint, they're doing their job. They use that as an excuse to extort and bully us. But if I come with sincere agape love, like try to generate that within myself, I found I had more successful interactions than saying, oh, you're a bad guy. And I agree with you, Derrick. I don't hate all cops. And I understand they're in a situation of getting money. So just like school teachers and all these people out here collecting money, doing stuff they don't want to do, they do have discretion in their job. And I'll say that too. I said, you found me in peace, correct? Why don't you just let me go in peace? Fair enough. And, kind of like let them know that I see them. And even though they got a uniform, they're not necessarily a bad guy. So I just want to make that comment. And thank you, Derrick, for joining us tonight. By the way, the exit and build philosophy, Derrick, I got so much love and appreciation for because I think that is the path to success. One of them, as I shared there at Mexico, is liberate ourselves from mental slavery, from statism, celebrate that freedom, create something, exit, and build. So I think there's a winning formula. We're going to get through this tough time, but your leadership and you shine your light is really appreciated by all of us out here and especially in this community. So a lot of gratitude and love to you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, man.
All right, Derrick, I really appreciate you. Everything you do, you're a real gift to humanity.
I appreciate that, Clint. If anybody does want to continue the conversation or reach out, you can email me at intothelight@protonmail.com. I answer my emails and try to get back to everybody. And I appreciate, thank you, Clint, for inviting me on, and I'll see you soon. And yeah, spread the word. Fluoride's poison, and we're trying to raise awareness about that. If you want to find me at theconsciousresistance.com, guys. Hope you'll check out my book. And till next time, I'm going to end the way I always do. This is an affirmation that I've used since I was in prison. It's the way I end a lot of my videos and my talks. If anybody feels inclined, they can share it too. But you are powerful, you are beautiful, you are free.
All right. You are powerful, beautiful, and you are free. Amen. What do you think about that, Portia?
Oh, I love it. That's so beautiful. I'm a big affirmation person myself, so I will adopt it for sure. And thank you for having him on. He was just a delight, very graceful. And I love the fact, like you said, how he transitioned his life from what it was to the beautiful person that he is today. You know, sometimes we have to go through these types of trials and rock bottom situation for us to blossom into, you know, who God intended us to be. And those experiences that we have is what molds us and make us able to be as compassionate and as genuine and real and authentic as Derrick appears. So kudos to him. And with regards to that book by Napoleon Hill, it's a definite must read for everybody. It is so informative and so enlightening, and it really, really makes you think about things in an absolutely different way. It raises your consciousness. I've read it a couple of times. I have the hard copy and I have it on audiobook as well. So absolutely a beautiful book. Thank you so much. And if you wouldn't mind, can you put the photo of Derrick's book up again for me? I would definitely like to buy it. Excellent. Right, thank you. All right, thank you. Most of
Thank you too, Portia. Thanks for
apologies.
being here.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
Hello, Michael.
Hey, Clint. Yeah, I wanted to ask Derrick because he's got a thing coming up, which is the Freedom Cells Challenge. But I'll challenge the folks on this call that especially if you're in California and you either have a Freedom Cell or would like your Freedom Cell to expand, or you want to start a Freedom Cell, I'm working with a couple of Freedom Cells down here in Southern California in the San Diego area to expand and optimize the Freedom Cells system across California. So that Freedom Cells Challenge, which is not next week, but the following week, the 19th through 23rd, that came to my attention.
Wonderful.
Recently.
Wonderful. Thanks for putting that out there. Can I ask you, because it's
Yeah.
kind of a question, when I was organizing in 2020, folks who wanted to assert their health freedom, there were a lot of people who had a strong desire to connect with each other in regional areas, you know, here in San Francisco, literally at the level of neighborhood, so they wouldn't have to go across town to meet up with like-minded people. And there were a good number of people who wanted that, but then there were almost as many people, especially at that time when it was unclear what they were willing to do, that they were resistant to the idea of giving up their, their name, their address, and their phone number into a database that potentially could be, tracked. And then how easy would they make it to, basically, here's your list of all the people who are your dissidents to go after.
It's a paradox indeed.
It is a paradox. Okay. I'm not afraid, personally.
Right. I mean, obviously, you and I have our content out, like David and Derrick and so many others, very publicly. But not everybody's going to do that. In fact, the guy that started this kind of a leadership academy concept here in San Diego that I'm a part of, he runs a Freedom Cell, but you will never see his full name or see a picture or a video of him online. And he runs a Freedom Cell. He has meetings. So if you're in the group, you kind of know him, but you don't know everything. And it's because he has a government job and a son to take care of, and he's had a difficult divorce and all kinds of things that he's juggling. And he don't want to lose his government job for speaking against the government, but he's going to do it. He's just doing it carefully. So I know a lot of people like that whom I kind of protect. Like I know enough about
so
them.
You can go into the Freedom Cell Challenge and be anonymous.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You could use a fake name if you wanted to. You could use a icon instead of a photo if you wanted to. What the part of the key with freedom cells is location, but don't give your home address.
Oh,
I always
okay.
recommend that people give an address that is a place where they could host a meeting, whether it's a park or a
Ah,
or a library or a cafe or whatever. It's, close enough to your home to be convenient to your neighbors, but don't give it away.
wow,
And
thank
then
you.
and then most of the action actually happens on Telegram more than even on the website. So there's 40,000 some people on the website itself, but I'm sure there's a lot more doing the Freedom Cell thing, either through Telegram or just casually. And that's part
Mhm.
of the intention is for it to be decentralized. From my perspective, that's a blessing and a curse, like every strong characteristic is a blessing and a curse. Without some degree of hierarchy and coordination, we don't we're not a powerful voting bloc or force to be reckoned with. So I'm constantly trying to steer people in the direction of some organization, hierarchy, and delegation and all that.
Yes, thank you. And I think what you've said kind of clears the way for a number of people who may have had some questions about it. And that's a really clever way to handle it. But because as much as you said, things are convenient to be online, but there's a huge craving and a necessity to really physically be present with one another, especially when you do have the anonymous element. You want to meet somebody in person, and I get it online, you want to be anonymous, but when you're standing next to me, I really want to know who you are and trust you, because that's really, I think trust is the commodity, if you will. The trust is the element, trust is the spirit that is the bond and between us, and it's what's been lost, unfortunately. And trust, being fickle that it is, and once lost, it's hard to regain. But we must assert trust. We must risk to trust again. I'll put it that way. Thanks for everything you're doing. Anything else you'd like to share with us while you're online? You're in good health, happy and healthy?
Yeah, things are going well enough. I exactly as you've said. We need to have more trustworthy and trusted relationships, and that requires it's really strongly enhanced. I mean, I have some really core people in my life that I've never met in person, including David James Rodriguez, whom I just adore, and I'm glad he drew me to you. Um, but it really helps if you have experience with people in person, and we need that local community structure to protect each other and maximize our resources. Frankly, I feel if we really did this well. And I think the Freedom Cells structure and vision is the best in the world. I think I find Derrick Broze to be my number one hero in this entire freedom realm. Everything he says it seems spot on to me, and the way he does it, the amount of stuff he's done, in coordination with John Bush and Ramiro Romani and all the other team that they've built over these years has been just par excellence and really crucial. So I really feel if we did that vision well, if we coordinated and communicated well with our local communities, and the basic concept of a freedom cell is that it's 8 people, but then you network with other groups of 8 people, but it's kind of like a family. And as folks have found their families and their former friends and workplace associates to be not necessarily on the same page sociopolitically or biochemically, we really need to build completely alternative structures and support each other. And if we, to the extent that we do that, I think we will save our world, save our civilization, save carbon-based life in this realm. But it really requires us to learn how to collaborate, to learn how to be team players and transcend uh, competition toward collaboration.
Amen. Hallelujah. Yeah, this free traveler movement is a movement, and it requires some kind of critical mass for, there's always the vanguard, the ones who are willing to stick their neck out and test the system and try different things. And we're so fortunate to have had many of them join us on these monthly gatherings. And yet, let's be honest, the bulk of people, even with the right understanding of sovereignty, will wait for a momentum to get behind. And so in time, that's what we'll be getting. And things like the infrastructure of the freedom cells could be the very architecture behind that. So thank you for promoting it, and let's use it for free travel and all the other freedoms. Freedom, let freedom ring. Okay, Michael Curving, how are you tonight? Thanks for being here.
Hey, Clint. Good to see you.
You too.
Um, yeah, I just wanted to ask Derrick. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance, but I know because he oscillates between Morelia and Houston a lot, I was curious to get his take or strategy on crossing a border without a license. And I don't know if that's something he does. I know often he travels in caravan, so possibly it's easier to slide over at that border crossing, let someone else take the wheel, or maybe not. Maybe he does, and if so, that's what I was hoping to pick his brain on. But maybe I can ask him that privately or email him. But yeah, anyway, just it was great to have him on and get his wisdom. And appreciate you again for organizing these talks every month. I haven't been on since the last time that I was here, I guess as a guest in August. But just to update you on that, I guess it's been another 6 months or so, and I'm still free traveling, and no real issues, other than somewhat of a close encounter I had, but it didn't end up in any sort of in a stop or anything like that. So, but I was actually at a cafe down in I've been staying in a small beach community down on the Gulf of the Texas Gulf for about a month, and I visiting a local cafe that was very small. And the first day that I was there, I had a conversation with the owner, and I guess he spied through the glass window there, and my car with my license plate, and so he queried me about it just out of curiosity. He said, "Oh, what's with your license plate?" So, I had the conversation with him and, told him what it was about and my principles and all the rest. And it kind of it kind of got the nod. And, oh, good for you. That's interesting. And the conversation kind of trailed off, a bit after that, but I didn't think anything of it otherwise. But evidently, I don't know if that, might have made him uncomfortable, or maybe he had an image of in his head about who I was, as maybe like he'd seen videos and understood me as a sovereign citizen or someone who I really don't know. But about a week later, I was in there again, and I'm sitting in there on my laptop, doing some work. And the next thing I knew, two boys in blue walk in the door, like fully armed and everything. And I wasn't sure what was going on, but I had that feeling in my gut like it wasn't good. But in any event, he had called them on me, and he just wanted me out of his store. So they pulled me aside. They said, "We'd like to talk to you outside for a moment." I said, "Okay." And I thought, maybe it was about, my plates. So I was expecting to be questioned, but instead they said, yeah, the owner he wants to let you know that he's not comfortable with you here and he would like you to leave. And I was just floored, but I said, all right, you know, not a problem. I was like, I respect everyone. I respect their property rights, and this is his shop. If you don't want me here, then you say no more, and appreciate you guys. Thanks for letting me know, and I'll just collect my stuff and I'll leave. But of course, the two cops had both their cars, one adjacent to mine and one was parked directly behind me. So I know they could see my plates. And so I got right in my car, and I figured, as soon as I pull out into the road, they're going to pull right after me. But they didn't. They didn't. Neither one of them left. So I just went along my way. And that was that.
Wow. That's a surprise ending. My
Yeah.
goodness. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if anything, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it could have been anything. I really know. Maybe they just didn't want to bother with me. Maybe they had something else to do. I guess I do want to reiterate, though, Derrick mentioned, a bit about kind of like the energetic thing. And I think that's something that I talked about a good deal, if you recall, on when I was on last. That's a big component for me. And I try to, you know, not, stay centered and not my approach, in those encounters is, I guess, not, to be overwhelmed and just have a positive outlook and no matter what. So I wasn't really nervous at all. Like, through, so there was a bit of nervousness at first when, because of course, I didn't know what the confrontation was going to be like, but as soon as it was clear, what they were there for, and they were very congenial with me and, everything. So, but when I got in my car to drive off, I didn't really think much about, what was going to happen, if it was going to be an issue. I just got in the car and drove off like, all right. So I don't know whether that played a factor or not, but yeah, I do really believe in that, in the energetic thing, a good deal.
They're predators,
Sorry.
and like a good predator, they smell the fear in their prey. They don't
Mm.
want they want easy prey. They don't want hard. They don't have to work hard.
Yeah, right.
Good. Thanks for that story. You're a superstar. I love it. Thank you.
That's about it.
Come back and we'll continue this same conversation.
All
Forwarding the
right.
movement. Yes. Hello,
Yes.
Vishal. It's been a while. How are you?
Hi, Clint. I'm well. I hope you're well too. So, I just wanted to share a few thoughts based on several people's comments. So, let me start with Derrick. He said something very significant in the beginning, and obviously, people appreciated that. But that really hit home with me is the part about personal development and personal evolution, because really, you can't really be free if you're not free here. And if you have fear, you are effectively not free here. So the first thing that clicked for me, I mean, that clicked 2 years ago, but it's good to see it emphasized back in early 2021, was what does it mean to be free? And once you kind of grasp that and you realize that, I mean, you are just as free as the next man. It doesn't matter whether it's Clinton or Biden or whoever. Or the police guy you're talking to, it changes the entire dynamics. And so I think that's a very important thing that I've seen even in this community. Even though people are very, very conscious, there is a lot of people perhaps who have not really thought that deeply about becoming free here first, because I see them 3 years, 4 years down the line still doing the same things, whereas if they had done that evolution, their actions would be different. So that's one thing. And the other important thing that Derrick said was that there's no situation that's going to bulletproof you against everything. So you as a man or a woman need to be able to stand your ground. And that starts with understanding what freedom is, what it means to be free, and having that confidence, which is what Michael was talking about. The second point was what Krista said, which is how you interact with the person at the opposite end. Now, I don't know about being kind or whatever, but the principle is to remove controversy, because anytime you create controversy, you create argument, you get into problems. So if doesn't matter whether you are kind or this thing or super this thing, but if you are neutral and you are attempting to remove controversy and you're constantly asking questions which keep things in balance but are asking the other person across from you, why is it that they are asking you to do certain things, then hopefully, not always, you can get out of what might have turned out to be a sticky situation. So that's something that I also had to learn in the initial days. I was just okay, civil code 52, blah blah blah, and stuff like that. It took me about a year and a half, 2 years to get to the point and realize that none of that really works very easily. And so that's one thing. And so removing controversy, if we are focused on that, perhaps that can help more than anything else. But this ties back to the point about that Michael made, Michael Kinder, about having the ability to be cooperative. Well, if you're not evolved here, you can be cooperative, and I've seen that. I've met about maybe 300 to 400 people, maybe more in the last 3 years. And I've interacted with a lot of them with an open mind. But what I discovered is that because of these mental blocks, people are not able to cooperate after beyond a point. Very soon the cohesion goes away, because initially everybody comes together thinking, yeah, this is my soulmate. This is the person that thinks exactly like me. But then there's no cooperation at the end of it, because again, people are selfish. They don't understand. They haven't evolved. So everything just kind of falls apart. And that's one reason, in my personal opinion, why a lot of these movements haven't really gone anywhere, and they won't go anywhere until that evolution happens. And maybe that's the purpose of this, from a more divine perspective, to help people to evolve. Because until that happens, you can't cooperate, because you don't even understand what it means to cooperate, because you don't understand yourself. Okay. And so that's it. That's my spiel. That's my soapbox. I'll get off it now.
Gotcha. Very well put. Thank you. People like you, Vishal, communicating this primary concept so purely, it really does inspire me, and it makes me want to look deeper into myself and identify those things that I didn't even know really were limiting me or holding me back or keeping me, what did you say, immature, not growing up. And I want to be a full-blooded man. If there was such a thing as a rite of passage, I don't know, maybe I would pass it. Maybe now that I'm 58 years old, maybe. I'm growing up fast. I'll tell you, I'm making up for lost time. I spent a lot of my adult years not being this sovereign person that needs to really be self-possessed, really needs to be able to manage his own affairs, really needs to be able to produce value in the society and the community, sufficient to, to have my needs met, and to contribute to the broader community at the same time. So all I can do is say amen, Vishal. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Clint. Yeah, I mean, as you said, it's a continuous process, till our last dying breath, So it's not like anybody ever evolves fully, but it's a quest we are on, from the day you're born to the day you die.
Okay. Look who's here, Private Nobody. How do you do?
Greetings, everyone. I really wanted to contact with Derrick because I ran across something this morning that was congruent with what Derrick had mentioned and Michael W. had mentioned. And it's about a program that I saw on Mike Adams' platform about this guy, Mike Winner, who's created this censorship-proof platform that evolves into not just the financial, but the small communities and the like as an ecosystem within itself. And I think, Mike W. and Derrick should be interested in that. I dropped the link in the chat, and I said something to think about with 3 emojis in there. Everybody needs to check that out. Everybody on this call needs to check that out. And just for the thoughts, because what they had put together is people that come together that are totally disassociated from the system. And based on what Derrick was talking about, and even Mike W., that has to take place in order for them to take the boot off your neck. Because just about everybody in this system, in some form or fashion, has agreed to a contract, agreement, or trust that gives the government the authority over your body. You take that away, they have no authority. And I know this for a fact. Just recently dealt with a situation with somebody. That fact was proven. Soon as they found out that there was no attachments to the system, they had to let them go. It was just as simple as that. So why we are entangled and can't have freedom because we have voluntarily, whether knowingly or unknowingly, put ourselves into an indentured service or even slavery status. by our own doing, either from our parents in the beginning, but once we became the age of majority, we continued it through and never corrected the record. So now we're beholden to them. That's why the cops treat you like they do, because you're a subject. You're a subject of the state because you enjoined with the estate that they had created for you. And as long as you stay in that suretyship or trustee position, they have dominion and control over you, the man or the woman. So, and what this guy was talking about, they called the program Quartal. You know, they changed the Q for the P. And that's the main thing that they really talk about, although they talk about the financial things and all of that. But when towards the end of the interview, which is about an hour, it's about separating. And you know, Clint, that's my big calling, is the separating from the system. So he was talking to the choir when he was talking on that interview. But I truly, I want to get in contact with Derrick. I'll pass that information on to him also. With that, I yield.
Okay, thank you. And I want to create some space tonight for sure. If anyone here has a specific scenario where you're dealing with law enforcement around traveling, maybe you got a citation, maybe you've recently driven without a license, or maybe you've taken off your license plate and replaced it with a private plate. Maybe you've done something concrete, or you're facing some actual, like, real-time situation. I want to definitely make space for that. I love this conversation, and I want to let it blossom. But we are here to support, because it does happen. People have real-time issues that they're dealing with, and we want to be able to provide that support. Is that you, Lisa, by chance? Tell us what's going on with you.
Okay, so I recently flew on a plane from Los Angeles International Airport to John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. And then I flew home. On the way to the way out of LAX, there was no facial recognition. This is about the facial recognition restrictions that are coming in. There was no facial recognition software that was inflicted on anybody. We were not offered it. We were not told anything. It was not posted. I didn't see it. And I went through security. And on the return, I was told that if I was not going to submit to that, then I was not going to be allowed to go through security. Now, I was immediately brought a supervisor who had no badge, had no name tag or name. He was confrontational and firm. I demanded to see the law. He basically ignored my request. And my husband ran into the same thing. And my mother was with us. She was not required to use the facial recognition. I was told I should stand to the side until I decided to come out of basically timeout to be willing to submit to what they were telling me I needed to do. Now, obviously, that's not required at all airports, so it can't be considered required by TSA. And we, at that point, left the area because he was telling us that the only thing that we could do was go back to the check-in counter for the airline. And this is a major American airline carrier. And as soon as we got to there was a woman there representing the carrier telling me, I understand you don't want to be flying on the plane. I said, I never said such a thing. She says, well, you don't want to go through security. I said, I'm willing to go through security, but they need to show me the law that says I have to be required to do this. And she said, well, you need to go and ask them. I said, I did ask them. She says, well, the only thing I can do for you is refund your ticket. So we went back to the gate. I'm sorry, we went back to TSA and hoping that the same man wasn't going to be there. Maybe he was going to be on break. And I quoted him that and my husband and I were both wearing this product called reflectacles, which is to prevent the cameras from being able to scan your eyes. And we told them that under ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, we had a right to go through because we had eye sensitivity and we were rejecting their scan. Oh, by the way, on the way out from the first time, the man told us that I said, I'd like to know your badge number and your name. And he said, I'll tell you that when you agree to go through and take the picture, have your picture taken. So basically I got nowhere. So it came back, that man showed up yet again, and he told me I needed to leave. I told him, where's the law? My husband showed him a website that showed him that we had rights. Basically I was given the ultimatum that I could leave my health compromised mother to go on the airplane by herself. She was being pushed in a wheelchair, or I could go home or wherever I was going, but I wasn't going to get through. And I'd miss my flight and I wouldn't be able to take her home. And so we know that there's no law. And I stood my ground until I realized that my husband and I both had a read on it, that he was going to potentially have us physically removed. And unlike whoever the other person was who was ready to go to jail for these things, I felt I had an obligation to my mother. And so we came home having submitted to this scan and looking to have our rights for free passage restored. We're law-abiding citizens, and I know there's a question about being a citizen, but we're law-abiding citizens, and we have we've never had any trouble traveling before. And I was looking to find out if there was anybody in this group that has connections to legal assistance to pursue this. I can see that I just saw an article from the Gateway Pundit saying the TSA is about to roll out facial recognition software to 400 airlines or airports. And this is a major move toward totalitarianism in this country. And for all that we can say that we want to be able to travel in our car, we're not going to be able to get out of our city very well if we can't take the airplane. So I'm just wondering if anybody wants to stand with me and my husband to fight this. And if anybody has any resources or any suggestions for us, because I've already been in this fight to resist the digital agenda now for 2.5 years. And I'm familiar with the fact that this is part of the digital city and the fact that they don't want us to go anywhere and they'd rather have us all be dead anyway. So, I mean, we see the big picture, and this appears to me to be against the Fourth Amendment, which is unreasonable invasion of your personal, your bodily autonomy. So I was just wondering, I mean, I see that there's some people writing in the chat, but it's hard for me to read that while I'm talking. So I appreciate what you're posting. I'm just wondering, does anybody have suggestions or wants to work with us? I'm here in California, but this is also in New York, and I also have a concern that I don't know who, I don't know what the legal system is. You have to go back to New York and file a case, and what the legal system is in New York. I really would like to look to somebody who has a specialty in the law, so I don't have to do this myself. But we also we just want to stop this. We want to find the path to stopping the rollout, because this is going to freeze us all. It's going to leave us stuck where we are. Okay, I'll stop talking and wait to hear if anybody else says anything. But I appreciate you folks being there at the perfect time for me to bring this to some people who actually would care about it.
Yes, we definitely care about it. We've been focusing on the roadways and the highways in all these months, and yet the air travel keeps coming back as a concern. And it's interesting because there's a lot of similarities, obviously, but there's a lot of differences, and interstate travel is involved. And like you said, but the constitutional rights are still the same. We should be able to freely travel. So I'm just going to ask, does anyone have something to offer Lisa in terms of some concrete suggestions or advice? Do you have something, Vishal? Go ahead.
Yeah, Lisa. I mean, it's a very interesting story, and it's unfortunate that you had to submit to that. First, you have to make the decision that you wish to take it forward. There's absolutely nobody else, no matter what the best lawyer is, that can take it for you. That's point number one. Number two is, I wouldn't rely on the legal system to do it. And the legal system, the legal system is the one that's abusing the men and women of the world in the first place. So how can you expect to get any consideration from that system? That's not clearly the way to go, because it's corrupt. And it's been evident by, if you look at all the decisions that have happened in the last several years, whether in California or Supreme Court or wherever, they're junk, nonsense. I hate to be very dismissive of it, but that's my opinion. It makes no sense. It doesn't provide any relief in any specific way, or any long-lasting relief. It always leaves things open so that it can be twisted around later. So if you want a definitive thing, then perhaps the way to go would be to sort of enforce your law, and there are ways to do that can be talked about, and see if that gets anywhere. Even that doesn't guarantee anything, because it's an uphill battle. I'll not deny that, and so that's what I just wanted to let you know.
And I'm not saying that I want to fight this for me, or that I want damages. I don't really care about damages. I want the whole thing to stop.
There are some fundamentals that need to be learned, and they don't relate to the legal system. They relate to fundamental law, the concept of freedom and how to enforce it, how to press a claim against somebody that is violating your rights. There's a whole process to that, which is different than the legal system. The legal system, just to give you one in 10 seconds, the legal system loves to have you come to them with a controversy, so it can then it can decide upon that controversy. So it's like the 5-year-olds fighting each other. Hey, he took my candy. The judge is going to decide whether John took your candy or not. But when you go and press a claim as a man or a woman in law, and you're enforcing the law of Lisa Kastner, then you are the judge, jury, and executioner effectively. And when you go forward with that, and that claim can also be pressed in the existing court of law, but except that it's no longer working as a court of law, it's working as your court on your behalf, with the so-called judge actually acting as a magistrate, whose only job is to see your claim, and if your claim is valid, and it would be valid based on things that you would have built up to even get to that point, then the magistrate is just a clerk. He or she has to stamp it and say, yeah, this is done. Even then, you may not be able to enforce the claim. That's a whole another enchilada yet. But that's what I'm trying to tell. That's what I've come to understand in 4 or 5 years of doing this.
Okay, I will.
Thank you very much for this conversation. We are looking for creative solutions, how to deal with TSA if you want to fly today. We're going to continue the conversation, I guess. I want to thank everyone for coming. David, what an awesome conversation once again. It just flies by, just solid, intensive, like amazing, beautiful people coming together and sharing everything from the spiritual realm to the concrete solutions to the various problems we're facing. Isn't it amazing?
Yes, it is beautiful. Yeah, thank you for your leadership, Clint, and everyone else, Private Nobody and Neil and some of the people, especially Derrick, Broze. It's up to us to create the world. This is one of the takes that I appreciate, Vishal. We can come together and make it a win-win relationship, make it good for everybody, because this is the path to success, in my opinion, is that we are releasing the idea that somebody else is responsible for our children, for our food, for our water, and these things. And that's a big deal, but we can do it. So just remember that it's a new paradigm. Remember that we used to have horses delivering letters by the Pony Express. Now we can text people instantaneously, okay? So just as a reminder that everything is evolving, and they're gonna try to devolve us into their digital ID, CBDC, all that baloney, and we're gonna win. We're gonna strive above and find solutions. So that's why this confab is so important, because we get to have these kind of conversations. And I'm glad to see there's disagreement. I'm glad to see there's some difference of opinion, because that's how we evolve as a species. And for so long, they just gave us one idea, one message on the mainstream news and say, this is the only way. And now the future is decentralization, personal responsibility, individual self-ownership, consent, and all these things that we're discussing here. So I just want to honor you guys all for being here. And yeah, all the things that are just flying up, and the TSA sucks and the cops suck, and like, you know, but there's humans in them. There's a human soul in them. So there is a possibility for each interaction. And we'll talk about how I go through the TSA next time, because that thing just sets me off. But this is what we get for our parents and grandparents who did the best that they can. Now the ball is on our court. It's up to us, and hopefully pass it down to our children or grandchildren, or create some type of intergenerational impact. And I think that's what we're doing here on these videos. You can cut up these clips, take some part that Derrick said or some other person said, take it and share it. It's up to you and us to create the media. And that's why what we're doing, Clint, is so grateful, and can't believe it, almost 2 years into it. So we're just going to keep banging the drum of freedom and truth and free traveling. And we'll see you guys next month. We'll send you guys peace and love. And thank you for all the leadership and people rising up out there. It's so important.
Amen. Hallelujah. God bless everyone, and good night.